My name is May. I love yarn. I love to knit and crochet. Those are my hobbies, and I also happen to have been born visually impaired, legally blind, and completely colorblind. So I mostly knit and crochet by feel. And a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago now, I don't remember, I released a tutorial for my fancy and faux fur knit hat. We worked it up in the knitpicks we crochet Fairytale fur in the color Paloma. It's super bulky, number 6, 100% polyester yarn. And this is the hat that we made together. And I have been showing you for a while on my channel that I originally made this one in gray for myself in the color Lapin. I designed this set over a year ago, long before I had a YouTube channel, and I made myself these sort of arm warmers, these fancy and faux fur arm warmers, and of course the scarf to match. And I thought, you know what? This little hat is wonderful. We did it for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and you can just make these in the pink to give out for breast cancer awareness, right? But you can also, as a holiday season, so this whole set, right? This scarf and these little fingerless sort of arm warmers and hat scarf set would make a wonderful, wonderful Christmas gift. So I thought today y'all might want to do that with me, so you have the option of making the full set. So today's tutorial is the tutorial for my fancy and faux fur fingerless knit mitts, okay? So now, because I did make these over a year ago and didn't take any notes, that's kind of typical of how I work. I work on the fly. I did say I'm going to remake those, right? And just make sure that I actually know what I'm doing before I teach them. And you saw me working up the black ones in the color Corvo, and I did indeed make up a set in black. These are for myself. I'm going to go ahead and make with you today a set in the Paloma that I will gift to whoever I give the hat to. So for today's tutorial, you will need, and I made my hat and my fingerless mitts here with 2 skeins, and this is what I have left, this little wad of yarn that I have left. Not too much, not really enough to do too much more with. So what we're going to need today for this tutorial for our fancy and faux fur fingerless mitts, arm warmers, not sure what you want to call them, you're going to need some Fairytale fur or some other substitute of a number 6 super bulky polyester yarn. We are going to work them up on a US size 11 or 8mm needle. You can use, they're going to be worked in the round. You can use whatever method that you want to use. If you want to do magic loop, you do magic loop. If you want to do it on 2 circs, do it on 2 circs. If you want to work on double points, you work on double points. I'm not here to tell you what the best method or needles is for you to work in circular knitting, okay? So in my opinion, this is a fairly easy pattern. What you're going to need to know how to do, the skills that you're going to need to know today is how to cast on, right? How to cast on, how to join in the round. I will show you how I do that. But again, I'm not here to change how you do that. If you have a different method for how you join in the round, then you do you, right? Okay, and then you're going to need to know how we got 4 rounds of garter stitch. So you're going to need to know how to knit and purl the garter stitch in the round. Then we're going to work in stockinette stitch, and then you will need to know how to do a basic increase. I use knit one through the front and the back to create this thumb gusset. Now I get my thumb gusset kind of big. I don't mind that. Of course, if you don't want yours that big, you don't need to make yours that big, right? And then we, of course, we finish it off with a little bit more garter stitch, and you will need to know how to bind off, okay? So those are the skills that you need today to make these. Now, these are pretty long. My black ones and my gray ones are pretty long. I really wasn't sure how long they were going to be. So I did 4 rounds of garter stitch, and then I did 20 rounds of stockinette stitch for these before I started my thumb gusset, okay? So there's a lot of flexibility, in my opinion, in this pattern, because by no means do you have to make yours like full-on arm warmer length, right? If you want fingerless gloves that are half the length, you can do that. I think we're going to do that today with the pink ones, just so you can see the difference, right? We could do that. We'll see. You could absolutely do it with like 12 rounds of stockinette or 16 or whatever your preference is. Okay. So there's a lot of flexibility with this pattern. And also, because these are fancy and faux fur, we're not doing any other stitch pattern beyond garter stitch and stockinette stitch in the round, okay? Because we don't have to fancy this up at all because the yarn is fancy. So we don't have to do cables or color work or lace or anything. The only shaping that we're going to do again is for the thumb gusset, but even that is worked in stockinette stitch, okay? So because of that, because of the size of my arms, I did 20 stitches around, okay? But that's not necessary because we're not doing a stitch pattern beyond stockinette stitch. If you want to make yours smaller, if you want to make yours 16 stitches around, you can do that. If you need to make yours 24 stitches around because you're making, I got some room, I got some stretch in there. There's still room in these for my arms to grow, right? My arms can get bigger and I can still absolutely wear these. But if you want to make yours larger with 24 stitches around instead of 20, you can absolutely do that. Just know that you're probably going to need more than 2 skeins of yarn if you're making the hat and the fingerless gloves, okay? So keep that in mind. And the other thing that I want you to keep in mind, if you are using more stitches than 20, is that I'm going to talk about having 20 stitches in the round, and then we're going to work some increases for our thumb gusset, and then we're going to bind off, and I'm going to talk about how we need to return to having 20 stitches in the round after our thumb gusset. So keep that in mind when you're making yours and I'm talking about it. If you start out with 24 on your arms, then after the thumb gusset, you want to again have 24 stitches in the round, okay? So whatever you start with in the round is what we're going to have after our thumb gusset. So when I'm talking about mine and I'm doing my math and I'm talking about returning my stitch count, if I'm doing 20, then after my thumb gusset, I'm going to have 20. If you're doing 24 because you want bigger ones or you got bigger arms, then after your thumb gusset, you're going to need 24 stitches, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and stop the camera. I'm going to put you on the horizontal tripod and we will get this tutorial started. Also, I'm getting lots of phone calls in my little earbud here. So I'm going to go stop the camera and take care of these phone calls, and then we'll get our fancy and faux fur fingerless mitts or arm warmer tutorial started. Okay. Okay, in today's video, we are going to learn how to cast on and join a project for knitting in the round on double pointed knitting needles. And the knitting needles I'm using today are a US size 11 or 8 millimeter knitting needle. And these are just some bamboo needles that I bought off of Amazon. I don't even know if they have a brand or not. But this is what we're working with today, and the yarn that we're going to be working with today is the knitpicks We Crochet Fairytale for super bulky in the color Paloma. And so these double points, you can certainly make this project on 2 circulars, but it can be a little challenging. The way that I join my projects in the round, it can be a little bit challenging to do that on 2 circulars. So I find it easier to start the project on double points and then we can transfer it over to 2 circulars once we get going. So for me, because I tend to cast on tight, I've talked about that in many videos, I hold 2 needles parallel for my cast on, and I am going to be using the long tail cast on today. So to do that, I just pull out enough tail. We are going to be casting on 21 stitches today for these fancy in faux fur fingerless mitts. This is the gray ones. So to start at the beginning, for my size, I use 20 stitches all the way around. But when I talk about working in the round, I always add one extra stitch to the beginning. So I'm going to cast on 21. And what I say about working in the round is for that first stitch, you knit it and forget it. You don't even count it in your stitch count. And then when I get to my very last stitch, I just do a knit two together with my last stitch in my first stitch. And so for me, that's really hard to do with such a small stitch count, 20 stitches on circulars. So I like to do this on double points. So excuse me. So we pull out, you know, about they say about 3 times the length of what you need for your project for the long tail cast on. So I've got my tail coming out towards me on my right hand, and then I've got my yarn on the ball behind me. So then I just stick my thumb and my index finger of my left hand in between those 2 strands, and then I just take my 2 double pointed needles parallel and I stick them in between underneath that strand of yarn, and then with my thumb and my index finger I just turn them upwards so that my thumb's up in like a hitchhiking or a thumbs up position, so that I've got a loop of yarn, a strand around my thumb, and I've got a strand going over and around a loop on my index finger. Then I take those 2 needles together, stick them underneath the loop, and my thumb, I go over to the strand on my index finger, I go over the top of that strand and then underneath it and grab it, and then I go back to my strand on my thumb and grab that again, and that is 2 stitches on the needle. We'll do that just a couple more times together. Thumb and index finger between the 2 strands, we part the strands, a thumb up, thumbs up position, both needle tips together, go underneath the strand on my thumb, we grab that strand, we go to the strand on the index finger, we go over the top of it and then underneath it to grab that strand with both needles, and then back over to our thumb and we grab that loop again. That is 3 loops on our 2 needles. We'll do that one more time together. Thumbs up, both needles go underneath the strand on the thumb, over the top, and then underneath the strand on the index finger, and back to the, oh, don't make that so tight, and back to grabbing the loop on my thumb. No, maybe. Back to grabbing the loop on my thumb. Okay, so we have 4, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, I think I grabbed that extra loop. Okay, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches on my needle. So I'm going to continue to cast on until I have 21 stitches. I will pause the camera. You don't need to watch all of that, all 21, and then I will get back with you and we'll talk about working on double points and joining. Okay, I have now cast on 21 stitches for my project, and as I said, I only need 20, but the way that I join my projects in the round, I always take whatever the cast on number is and I add 1 more stitch. So we have 21. So now I need to pull out one of my double points. So we do have a set of 5, and that's what we're going to need for our project today. So now you just pull out that needle and then you turn your project so that the end with the tail and the working yarn is pointed to the right so that we can begin knitting. So for this project with 4 double pointed needles, we're in 20 stitches, we're going to have 5 stitches on each of our 4 double points. However, because we have our extra stitch, we are going to have 6 because of the way I do it. If you join your projects in the round in another way and you don't do this where you knit the 2 stitches, the first and the very last stitch together, then you'll only need 20 stitches and you'll need 5 on each of your 4 double points, but I will have 6 on mine. So we just knit it like normal. We just take our first, we have all 21 stitches on one double pointed needle. This is what it should look like. It's a little bit crowded, but it's doable. We can scrunch them up there. Double points are great for small projects. We just stick our tip of one of our knitting needles, our double points. There's nothing on it. We just stick it into that first stitch front to back. We wrap our yarn and we knit that stitch onto the double point. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we want to just make sure that we slide all of those stitches down kind of towards the middle of our needle so that they do not fall off the needle when we start with another needle. So now we just take another double pointed needle, nothing on it, and we start from there, and we knit 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stitches onto that second needle. And again, you're going to want to make sure that you slide those stitches all the way down to the middle so they don't come off. Then we're going to take a 4th, technically our 3rd, but really I guess a 4th needle if you count the one that our stitches are on. We knit another 5 stitches from the original cast on needle onto this new needle, and we have 1, 'It's a little fiddly. 2 and 3. Now 4 and 5. And then again, you want to slide those stitches down to the middle of your needle so that they don't come off when they're just kind of hanging out there on the needle waiting to be worked with. I got to make sure my yarn is untangled here. Uh-oh, got like a little bit of a knot there in my yarn. Okay. Excuse me. And now we get out our 5th double pointed needle here, and we have still 5 unworked stitches left on this original cast on needle. So we go ahead and take this 5th double pointed needle and we knit 1, we knit 2, we knit 3, we knit 4, and then we should have 1 stitch left. And we're going to go ahead and slip that stitch just for a minute onto that needle without working it. And now we want to join this project in the round with these 4 needles. So we have to make sure that they are not twisted. That's one of the tricky parts. Getting started with these kind of projects can be a little bit intimidating, right? Because you've got all this going on here. You got to make sure your project isn't twisted when you join. And so now, as I talked about, we have this original extra stitch here. This is why I cast on an extra stitch. I go ahead and slip my last unworked stitch onto that first needle with the beginning of my project. And then, let's see. Okay, now I gotta find my working yarn back. This is kind of it's a little bit tricky when you first do it. It's a little bit hard to get used to. And so now I've got this last unworked stitch and this first extra stitch on this first needle. And I just go ahead and take, let's see, get my knitting. I'm going to go ahead and take the tip of my needle first and loosen those both up so we can do a nice knit 2 together. So we take our needle under both of those needle tips and we just do a knit 2 together, just like we're doing any other stitch. And now we should have 5 stitches on 4 double points. So that's what we have to begin
our project. Just like that. It's a little bit chaotic looking. It's a little bit of a mess. It should be a square. That should be what your project should look like. So we're going to go ahead and work some garter stitch in the round, which means we are going to start, oh my goodness, my yarn got really tangled here. So that means we are going to start purling this second row. That was row 1. That was knit. Excuse me. Sorry. So now we have 4 needles. We have our little square. And this is why you have 5 double points in a set. You always have this extra 5th needle for working with. That extra needle is your working needle. Now some people do knit socks and things on 3 needles and then they use the 4th one, but your traditional sets of double points are going to come with 5, so you can work in a square and then have a working needle. So now you bring your yarn to do garter stitch in the round. We're now connected and joined in the round. So to do garter stitch in the round, we need to purl our second row. So row 2 of our fingerless faux fur mitts, we're just going to purl every single stitch on this round. So now that you've seen the first round of how to knit and join in the round on double points, I'm not going to work this whole second round with you, right? But round 2 of our project is just purl. It's purl the entire round. It's purl every single stitch in the round. Okay, so I'm going to pause the camera. Well, maybe I'll do one more needle with you just so you can kind of get the idea. So once you purl that round, you want to slip those 5 stitches kind of again to the middle. This is kind of a slippery yarn, this faux fur, to be working on double points. A lot of times double points are traditionally done with, like for socks, and people use kind of those rusticy, sticky wools that are less likely to slide off of double points. So this will make this project a little bit tricky. So we probably will transfer it over to circulars after we do this. But I will work this second round with you where you just want to purl every single stitch to work row 2, to work the garter stitch round. So that's half of it. Slide those stitches to the middle so that they don't slip off, and then we will go to this 3rd needle here and make sure that I don't get my tail accidentally, and keep untangling my, I might have to pause the camera here just so I can untangle my yarn. Okay, so let me go ahead and purl this next row, or this next needle. This is needle 3. So if you're working on 4 double points, then you, instead of having 2 circulars, which I usually talk about needle 1 and 2, you will have needle 1, 2, 3, and 4 when you refer to your pattern, right? And then your 5th needle is just your working needle. So that is needle 3 of row 2 of our pattern. We have our purl row, and now I just need to work, let me find, oh my goodness, my little project here's getting kind of tangled. So there we go. So make sure that this is not tangled, right? That's always what they say when you first start joining a project in the round. You want to make sure it's not twisted. And so this is needle 4, and we are just going to purl these 4 stitches. Make sure we don't lose any of our needles. I can feel them slipping, so I'm going to have to really readjust this in a minute so that we don't lose any needles. So that's something that can be really hard to keep track of, especially if you're visually impaired like myself. It can be really hard to keep track of all your stitches on your needles and make sure they're not slipping. So that was all of row 2 of our that is all of row 2 for our project. So we are going to go ahead and let's see, what do I have here? Yes, we have our project still. I want to make sure all my needles are still in order. So I think now we are going to do round number 3, which is going to be a garter stitch round. And I think what I'm going to do is pause the camera and we will talk about transferring over this project to some circular needles now, because I don't want these to slip off, right? We don't want our project to fall off the needles, slip off our needles. So I'm going to do that. Get out my needles and untangle my yarn, and we'll talk about how we can transfer this over to circular needles. But that's a demo of how to cast on and join and work in the round on double pointed needles. Okay, so knowing how to work on double pointed needles, it's certainly a good skill. People usually use it for socks, for mittens or gloves, and sometimes for finishing off the tops of hats, different things like that. However, you know, I really do prefer, I learned on circulars and I prefer working on 2 circulars. So I am going to go ahead and transfer my project to 2 circulars. So we will do that. Okay, so we have our nice square here, and now we want to make sure that our working yarn is in the back again, because we are going to start knitting for row number 3 here of our fingerless mitts, and we have a nice long circular, also a US 11 size 8mm, and we're just going to go ahead and transfer now because we're going to work with 2 circs. We want to put half of our stitches onto our first circ, and that will become needle 1. So that means that we transfer the stitches from needle 1 and needle 2 onto 1 longer circular needle. So we're going to knit these 5 off of our first needle. Hang on. Okay, so we have 5 half of our stitches from needle 1 onto what is now also going to be needle 1. And now we're going to take 5 stitches off of needle 2, and we are also going to knit those on to needle 1 for round 3 of our fancy and faux fur fingerless mitts. And this, in my opinion, especially as somebody who's visually impaired, makes it much easier to manage so that I don't have to worry about my stitches falling off the ends of these slippery needles. So we got that out of the way. So we have half of our stitches transferred onto 1 circ. And now we're going to take what was needle 3 and make sure again that those are in the middle, not too close to the end of our circular knitting needle so they don't fall off of that. And now we're just going to take this other circular knitting needle, another 11, and so this is needle 3. This is what would be needle 3, which should have 5 knitting needles on it. So we're just going to knit 1, knit 2, knit 3. Gonna make sure I don't lose the stitches off of my last needle. Oh my goodness, see, that's why I don't like working on double points, because they're short and the stitches just about fall off of them. And if I don't monitor all those stitches all the time on all the needles, then they're likely to slip off. So I don't mind using double points sometimes for a small project like this, to join it in the round. It can be a lot simpler for me than trying to do that on 2 circs because of the way that I use. But it can be tricky to manage. So now we're going to go over to what was needle 4, and we should still have 5 stitches on that needle. And so got to see, that's another thing too, you got to make sure your yarn stays in the back because this is round 3. It is a knit row, and so we are going to go ahead and knit these 5 stitches off of needle 4, and get them onto what is now needle 2, our 2 circular knitting needles. Sorry, I think I was off camera there. Okay, so here we go. So that was round 3, and we have now just taken our project off of double points. So we will continue now with round number 4. And now we've got, this is what our project should look like now after doing those 3 rounds. And if you don't want to work on double points, or if you want to keep your project on double points, by all means, you do you. So for round number 4, we want to bring our yarn to the front because we're doing garter stitch in the round. We are going to purl this round. If you're new to sort of knitting garter stitch, when you're working flat, every row is knit, and when you're working in the round, you alternate between a knit row and a purl row to create the exact same type of ridges. So round number 4 of the garter stitch cuff portion of our, gotta make sure I'm not working with my tail. I have a really bad habit too of grabbing my tail and working with it. So here we go. Round number 4, purl every single stitch. Okay, I think I will pause the camera here. You don't need to watch this. And I will join you again at round number 5 when we start the stockinette portion, and we will talk about that. Okay, so I just completed round number 4 of the project and the 4th row of the garter stitch portion. So from here I'm going to start round number 5, or if you like to count your round, start your round count over on your stockinette portion, you go right ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go into that first stitch front to back, just start knitting. Okay, so I am going to just knit, since we're doing stockinette in the round now, we are just going to knit every single stitch all the way around for round number 1. And as I talked about in the intro, for the gray and the black, a fingerless, fancy and faux fur gloves, arm warmers, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't matter how many rounds you do. If you want yours to be like full-on arm warmers like mine, full length, then that for me required 20 rounds of stockinette stitch before I did my thumb gusset. So if you want yours that long, then you go ahead and do 20 rounds, and then we'll do our thumb gusset. However, if you want shorter ones, you can do 10 rounds of stockinette. You can do 12, 14, 16. You can do more than 20, but it will require more yarn than the 2 skeins, okay? So you make yours as long as you want, and then I'll finish up this part of round number 1 with you. We will do that together. We'll talk about this just a little bit more. So it doesn't matter on this project how long you make your gloves, okay? If you only make your 12 rounds of stockinette before you start the thumb gusset, that's fine. But the only reason that you do need to keep track of your rounds is because we are making a matched set, right? So we want our 2 fingerless mitts to match each other. That's what we're going for. That's the goal. We want our project to match. We want to make 2, and we want to make a matched set. So keep track of your rounds. For that reason, I would say count your rounds, so that if you do 12 on one, you're going to have 12 on the other, okay? But other than that, it doesn't matter if yours are shorter than mine, or you do 24 rounds and yours are longer than mine. It doesn't matter, just so that you have a match set, if indeed that's what you're going for. I mean, hey, if you want a mismatched set, who am I to judge, right? If you're making them for you and you want one longer than the other, then you don't necessarily need to count your rounds. But as for me, I'm going to gift these to somebody. I really can't wear this pink, so I am going to try to gift them a matched set. So I'm going to count my rounds, and keep track of them. So that was round number 1 of my stockinette portion. I'm just briefly going to start round number 2 with you in case anybody is brand new to knitting stockinette in the round. So round number 2 and all other rounds until we get to our thumb gusset are just going to be knit in the round, every single stitch, no changes to the thumb gusset, and just maintain your stitch count. Okay, so if you're doing 20 stitches around like me, then just make sure that you have 20 stitches at the end of every round until we start working our increases. If you're doing 22 or 24 stitches or 16 stitches or whatever, just maintain your stitch count until then. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera, and I will see you when we start working on our thumb gusset. You go for it. Make yours as long or as short as you want before your thumb gusset. Okay, let me finish up this stitch and I'll pause the camera. You knit your stockinette portion and I will knit mine. Okay, the one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video is that you will need 2 stitch markers. Now, if you don't want to use stitch markers, you don't like them, of course, you don't have to, but I think it's easier for me to do the thumb gusset with stitch markers because we're going to use a knit one through the front and the back loop for our increase, and so it's easier to mark off that stitch that we pull. We're going to pull 1 stitch from each of our needles, so we have 10 on each needle because I'm doing mine on 20. I'm only doing 16 rounds of stockinette stitch for these. We were going to make them shorter, but I'm going to pull 1 stitch from each side, and so I want to mark that with a stitch marker. Now, if you don't have stitch markers, you can take, of course, a scrap of waste yarn and then just tie it in kind of like a little loop or a knot or something to mark that off between your 9th and your 10th stitch at the needle. So we're going to go ahead and do, this is going to be for me, this is going to be my 17th round of stockinette stitch, and I am going to start my thumb gusset. So the nice thing about these fancy info fur knits is that they're both the same. There's no patterning or cables or anything on one side of the other. So we're actually going to work both exactly the same. It doesn't matter which one you wear on your right or your left hand. So to start our thumb gusset, we are going to knit the first, for me, because I'm doing 20 stitches all the way around with 10 on each needle, I am going to knit across. I'm going to knit 9 stitches on this first needle. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to knit 9 stitches all the way to our last one, and then we will place our stitch marker. Because we're working on a size 11 needle, you can kind of need larger stitch markers. I have a lot of stitch markers that would not fit on these needles. Okay, so we have knit 9 stitches on our first needle, and then we're going to go ahead and place one of these large stitch markers, and then on this 10th stitch we are going to knit it through the front and the back loop and create an increase on that stitch. So we have now made 1 stitch into 2. Okay, and then we're going to flip this project over. What we're doing right now is, let me find one of these back, is we are creating our thumb gusset right here. So we need to add stitches. We're doing some shaping here. So we are working in some increases, right? So this is our fingerless mitt, and we've worked it even from our garter stitch up, and now we're here at our thumb gusset, and it can be either side. And so what we need to do now is add some increases to make this section wider to accommodate our thumb, so that we have plenty of room. And then I made my thumb gusset pretty big on these. If you don't want yours that big, you don't have to do it that big, but mine are nice and big, soft and squishy, lots of room in there. So okay, let's finish up this round. So we're going to come around, we're going to pull our stitches for needle 2, and so what we're going to do is now, with the very first stitch on this second needle, or two center stitches in a row, is that we're going to knit this stitch through the front and the back loop. So now from 1 stitch we've made 2, and we are working an increase, and now we want to go ahead and place our stitch marker, and we should have 9 stitches left on this needle, and we are going to go ahead and knit every single stitch across to the end of this needle. So I am going to do that. I'm going to work every stitch to the end of this needle, and then on the next round we're just going to knit until we get to our stitch marker. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to pause the camera. I'm going to finish, well, I'm almost at the end of this round. I guess we'll finish it together. These are pretty short. That's a nice thing about working these up in a super bulky yarn, right? 20 stitches, it doesn't take long. So these are a fast, fun, and easy project. Great for holiday gifts. The whole set is fast, fun, and easy. You can work it up in a couple of days. So if you need a holiday gift quickly, these are great. So that was our first round of our thumb gusset, and we should have our stitch markers in. So we're just going to keep working this round. We're going to increase again. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to knit these first 9 stitches just like normal. Okay. The nice thing about these is that if you're new, I know some people are really intimidated by fur yarn because they can't see their stitches. Well, I'm visually impaired, and so I can't see my stitches. Anyways, I work by feel all the time, and I love the texture of fur yarn, so it doesn't bother me one bit to work with fur yarn and not be able to see my stitches. But it's also nice because, you know, if you're new to knitting and, you know, there's like mistakes, they're kind of just hidden in the fur. So, you know, something goes a little wrong, it's okay. It's okay. Your mistakes won't really show up in this yarn. So here we go. We are almost to our stitch marker here. Here we go. Okay, so what we want to do now is slip our stitch marker. We should have 9 stitches before our stitch marker. We're going to slip our stitch marker, and now with this very first stitch, we want to work an increase. So right now on this end of this needle, we should have 2 stitches left, right? Our original stitch that we borrowed from the body of our glove, and then our new stitch that we created out of it. And we want to once again work another increase in that first stitch. So we want to knit it through the front and the back loop. Okay, so we're creating an increase right there because we're creating that thumb gusset, and we're making that wider, and then we're just going to knit this next stitch. So now we should have 9 stitches plus 3, so a total of 12. And we're going to do, we're going to flip this over to now what is needle 2, and we are going to start out. We should have 2 stitches here before our stitch marker. To the right of our stitch marker, we should have 2 stitches. So we want to knit the first one just like normal, and then we get to the stitch right before the stitch marker. We want to put our increase there. Okay, that's the one that we want to knit through the front and the back loop. So that's the one thing, if you're brand new to making I like thumb gussets. If you don't like thumb gussets, you can literally just leave a hole. Some people just literally leave a hole in their project, stick their thumb out, let their little thumb be naked, and not create a gusset for it because they just don't like to fiddle around with gussets. And if that's you, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong. You do you. So we should have 3 stitches here now. To the right of our stitch marker, we should have 3 stitches. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now on my project. This is row, I guess it's 18 of the stockinette portion, or what would it be, 22 on the whole, or just round 2 of our thumb gusset, right? We don't need to complicate things too much. Round 2 of our thumb gusset. So I'm going to go ahead and knit all the way to the end of this round. And basically, when we're doing this, when we're making our thumb gusset, what we have to keep in mind is that what was I going to say about that? With our thumb gusset, is that all of our, okay, we're at the end of that round, and so now we're going to start round 3 of our thumb gusset, and we're just going to do the same thing. We are going to knit the first 9 stitches. Okay, so I think you get this. I'm going to stop. I'm going to pause the camera until I get to the stitch marker. Okay, so knit your 9 and then we'll get to the stitch marker. Okay, so I should be right here at my stitch marker. I should still have 9 stitches. On the right hand side of my stitch marker, we're going to slip our stitch marker, and now we should have 3 stitches here, and we always want to put our increase in the very first stitch, right after the stitch marker. If I can get in there, it's kind of tight on this one. Oh my goodness, so we've got it in the front. Oh my goodness. Wow, I made that one tight. So what I need to do, that can happen with your increases if you're a tight knitter like myself. Let me see if I can poke that in there. Oh my goodness, awkward to have that stitch so tight when I'm working on camera. Okay, so don't pull it off the needle like me. Okay, I got it off of there finally, but I pulled it off the needle without working it. So we want to go into the back of that stitch. I do knit tightly. Awkward. Okay. Knit that through the front and the back without slipping it off the needle. So 1 stitch became 2. That is our increase. So you always want to put your increase into that stitch right at the edge of your stitch marker. And we're going to do the same thing. When we flip this thing over, we want to do the same thing. We want to, because we have 3 stitches over there, we want to go ahead and knit the first 2, okay? So we want to knit 2, knit 1. Uh-oh, did I drop that stitch? I think I did. Oh my goodness, I did. I dropped the stitch on camera. Kind of fumbling around today. Okay, so drop that stitch. We are going to knit this next stitch. Okay, so we got that stitch. And then here is our stitch right before our stitch marker. And that's the one that we want to work our increase in. So that's one that we want to knit it through the front. And we want to knit it through the back. Okay, so that is the increase stitch. So now we should have 4 stitches on the right of that stitch marker. Slip that stitch marker and then knit across to the end of this round. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause the camera, finish up this round, start the next one, and we'll do another round of increases just like this. Okay, alrighty. Okay, I completed that round. I started my next round. I should have 9 stitches there before the stitch marker. We're going to slip that stitch marker on needle 1. We should have 4 stitches there. This first stitch is our increase stitch. We're going to knit it through the front, and we're going to knit it through the back, and then we're just going to finish up with these 3 stitches, and that should leave us with a total of 5 stitches on the left hand side of that stitch marker on needle 1, and we're just going to flip it over and work on needle 2. And we're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. We're going to work this increase exactly the same. We're going to knit. We should have 4 stitches here. We are going to knit 1, knit 2. If I can find my yarn back. I do knit differently. I know that. I'm aware that I knit differently than most sighted people. So we're going to knit 3 stitches, and then in this last stitch before our stitch marker, we're going to work another increase. We're going to knit it through the front, and we're going to knit it through the back. 5 stitches there on each needle. Remember though, we borrowed 1 from our project, right? So I'm going to go ahead and finish this round, and then we're going to do 1 more round of increases, okay? And we are going to work it exactly the same as we've done the previous rows. We knit 9, we slip our stitch marker, we work our increase in that first stitch, and then when we flip our project over, we knit the stitches until the last one before the stitch marker, and that's where we put our increase, okay? And that's going to be our last round of increase of increases, okay, for our thumb gusset, because these are pretty big thumb gussets and pretty roomy. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this round and then start the next one. See you there. Okay, here I am. I've started this round and we are at our marker. We are going to slip our marker and we're going to work this stitch through the front and the back, working our increase. That makes 2 stitches there. There should be 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and we're going to flip this over and we are going to do the same thing on the next side. We are going to work 4 stitches, and then in our 5th stitch we are just going to work our increase in that stitch. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in this last stitch we are going to work this stitch through the front and the back, and that should give us 6 stitches because we borrowed one from our project. So really our thumb gusset only has 5 stitches on each one. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. We're only going to have 5 because really we borrowed one, and we have to remember to put that stitch back. So I'm going to work to the end of this round, and then we are going to work 1 round even. Okay, so at the end of this round I work 1 more round of stockinette where we knit every single stitch, okay, with no increases. So after the last round of increases on the thumb gusset with we should have increased our project by 10 stitches total, right? 5 on each side. It's going to look like 6 because we borrowed a stitch. Okay, so this next round we work even. We do nothing different. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go ahead. I'll start this round with y'all, and then I will pause the camera and go ahead and leave you to it. You knit every single stitch, no shaping, nothing different, no increases. Okay, alrighty. Okay, so I just knit that round even every single stitch. Now to do our thumb gusset, we are putting on a garter stitch edging just like we did at the bottom, and just like we're going to do at the top. On our thumb gusset we are going to create some garter stitch. And remember, when we work garter stitch in the round, we knit 1 round and we purl 1 round, and we knit 1 round and we purl 1 round. So to start this out, again, just like the last round that we did, we are going to knit every single stitch. Okay, so technically I guess we have 2 rounds of just knit stitch, but I keep in mind now that this round will begin the garter stitch portion of our thumb gusset. Okay, so that's what we got to keep in mind, is nothing on the main body of our fingerless mitt is going to change while we're doing the thumb gusset. Okay, we're just doing, for now, we're just going to start that portion on the thumb gusset. But for this round, once again, knit every single stitch. Nothing changes yet, although we are, technically starting the 4 rounds of garter stitch, but we started with a knit round. So nothing changes on this round. Knit every single stitch. Okay, see you at the end. I'm going to finish this round and then we will talk about the next round. Okay, so I just knit every single stitch in that round, and now on this next round, on the main portion of our fingerless mitt, nothing changes. We just knit. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that I stay on camera. I can't really see what's happening here, so my apologies if I get off of camera a little bit. So we are going to knit every single stitch here. until we get to our stitch marker, okay? So the first 9 stitches of the main part of our glove are just knit. And now I'm at my stitch marker, and we want to create that garter stitch edging. So we slip our stitch marker, and then for these 6 stitches here, we go ahead and we purl them, okay? So on the thumb gusset, we want to purl these 6 stitches because we're just making a nice little garter stitch trim so that it doesn't curl. So we have a nice little edge on our thumb gusset that, oopsie, I missed my stitch, that matches oh my, I'm really struggling with that one. So we have a nice little edge that matches the trim at the bottom and at the top of our fingerless mitt. So we purl those 6 stitches. Then we flip our project over, and we're going to do the same thing on this side of our thumb gusset. We are going to purl the first 6 stitches here. So, because we're creating our garter stitch trim, okay? So here we go. We're going to purl, if I can find my first stitch back. Okay, there we go. We are going to purl 6 stitches on our thumb gusset. That is 3. This should be 4 and 5 and 6, and then we want to bring our yarn to the back to start knitting. And we're just going to finish knitting this round. And then what we are going to do is repeat these 2 rounds, okay? The last 2 rounds that I have worked, we are going to just repeat them. That is all. That's all we're doing, is repeating these 2 rounds. So the next round that we do, after this round, we are going to knit every single stitch all the way around, okay? And then the following round, we're going to do what we just did here. We knit every stitch up until our stitch marker, and then we purl the last stitches on needle 1 and the first stitches on the next needle. So I'm going to start this round with you, and then I will pause the camera. So on this round, we are going to just knit every single stitch because we're creating stockinette stitch on the main body, and then garter stitch on the thumb gusset. So I'll pause the camera. You'll go ahead and knit every single stitch. Okay, I just finished up that round where I knit every single stitch. And now for this round, of course, we are going to knit the first 9 stitches of our little glove here and keep them exactly in stockinette stitch. Okay, so knit the first 9 stitches. And then we will get to our stitch marker, and we will slip our stitch marker. And now we're going to work our garter stitch here. So that means we take our yarn to the front of our project, and we're going to knit these 6 stitches, okay? And then we're just going to do the same thing that we did before on the other side, all right? Where we take, we basically work this row in reverse, right? Where you do purling on the first 6 stitches, and then you will knit the last 9 to give us that nice little garter stitch. If I can find my stitch back. And then we will knit by purling those first 6 and then knitting the last 9. That gives us that garter stitch edging on the the thumb gusset. And I know a lot of people probably can't even see that garter stitch because there's not really stitch definition in these furry yarns, but it will keep it from curling on you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this and pause the camera and you do yours. So purl these 6 stitches and knit the last 9, and then we will work on closing off that thumb gusset. Okay, I finished off that row, started this next one. I knit my first 9. Now we're at our stitch marker, and what we want to do is pop off our stitch marker. And remember what I said at the beginning, that you want to maintain your stitch count after the thumb gusset. So we're going to knit 1 more stitch so that we can return our stitch count to 10. And then we can pop that stitch marker back on, and we're going to knit this first stitch, and then we're just going to leave it there because we're going to use it to close this back up again on the next round. So we're just going to leave that one there and ignore it for now, and then we're going to knit this next stitch here. Okay, and we are going to knit the next stitch here, this third one, and then this is where we start our bind off, and we're just going to bind off this stitch. So to bind off a stitch, if you've never done it like this before, you take the second stitch on your needle and you pass it over the top of the stitch at the end of your needle. A lot of people do that with the tips of their knitting needles. I don't have depth perception, can't see what's going on at the end of my knitting needles, so I don't do it that way, but you feel free to do that. We're going to knit the next stitch, and then we're going to bind it off by passing this second stitch on our needle over the top of that one. And then this next stitch, we're going to do the same thing. We are going to knit it and then bind off by passing the second stitch over the top of that one. Okay, and now we are going to, let's see here. We're going to flip our project over to the second needle, and we're going to start our bind off, and we are going to need this stitch. We're going to, it's a little bit tricky here, but we are going to need this stitch from the end of our needle here, right, where we're doing our bind off. So we're going to go ahead and slip that one over now from the end of needle 1. We're going to put it on to needle 2, slip it on over there, and then take this next stitch, the first stitch on needle 2. We're going to knit it, and we're going to pass that previous stitch over the top of that one. So we're going to bind this stitch off. Okay, there we go. And then the next stitch, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to knit it, and then we're going to bind off. Like I said, if you can do it with the end of your needle, you do it that way. You bind that off however you want. I just can't see what's happening there. So it's really hard for me to have, I don't have like fine motor coordination. Can't see where the tips of my needles are in relation to each other. So bind that stitch off. If I can get it over there, pull that over the top of that one. We're going to bind off our next stitch by knitting that one, and then doing the same thing, passing the second stitch on our needle over that one. So I've got 2 stitches here left. I'm going to knit this next one, and let's see, we're going to pass this next stitch over the top of it, and we're going to knit 1 more here, and then we are going to, we're at our stitch marker here, right? So now we should have 9 stitches to the left of it. We're going to pass this stitch over the top of the stitch that we just knit to bind it off, and now we have this stitch. And because we want to return our stitch count to 10, we're going to go ahead and pop off our stitch marker and not bind off any more stitches, because we want to go ahead and knit these 9 so that we have 10 stitches on needle 2. Okay, so we're going to knit this all the way to the end of the round. Okay, so I think we're almost there if I don't fumble my stitches. And these two gloves, like I said, there's no right and there's no left. These are just big. There's no fancy stitch definition. There's no pattern. Like some fingerless gloves, you got patterning or lace or cable on the back side of your hand. And so there's a right and a left. But these, you don't. We're just being fancy and faux fur. Okay, so this is what we have right now. This is what your project should look like. You're going to have your thumb gusset right here, and it's all bound off. So now what we're going to do on this next round is we are just going to knit across. We should have 10 stitches here on this round, plus the stitch marker and one more. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now we can pop off our stitch marker. We won't need it. What we're going to do is slip this stitch onto the end of this needle, and then we are going to flip our project over. We're going to get to needle 2, and we are going to close this up. Okay, so the last stitch from that needle, you do not want to work it. What you want to do is slip it from the first needle to the second needle, and then to close off that thumb gusset, what we want to do is knit that extra stitch that we left over from our thumb gusset together. We want to do a knit 2 together with that stitch, okay? And that's what's going to close off our thumb gusset. We're going to close off that circle by not working that final stitch, that last stitch. That's why we saved that extra. So technically it looked like, and then after we do a knit 2 together, we're still going to have 10 stitches that way on each needle, and that's why we do that. So when you have your stitch markers, it looks like you have 12 stitches between your stitch markers, but really 2 of those stitches we borrowed, right? We borrowed 2 stitches from our project, so that really only left us with 10 stitches for the thumb gusset, and then we have an extra stitch, just like how I do my cast on and my joining in the round. I have an extra stitch and I use it to do a knit 2 together to join in the round. I use that exact same technique to close off my thumb gusset and join it in the round. Okay, so let me finish that round and we'll take a look at what we have. So this is now what we have. By doing that, by reserving that extra stitch, we have done a knit 2 together across the thumb gusset, and we have just closed that off. Okay, so let's look at the gray one here, and that's what I did here. Is we just have our thumb gusset, we have our garter stitch, we have an extra stitch, and we just knit it together, knit 2 together from that extra stitch to the first stitch on needle 2, and that's how we close off that thumb gusset and return our project to working in the round. So this is what our project is looking like, right? We're going to put our pink one on, and here's what we have now. We have our 10, we should still have 10 stitches on each needle, and then we have created these extra stitches. We've done this increase, we've created this nice little thumb gusset, this nice little pocket for our thumb, and then we did that knit 2 together with that extra stitch that we reserved. That's why we reserve the first stitch. We return the first stitch after the stitch marker to the project, so we have 10. And then we take one of those stitches and we reserve it so that we have it to come around again on that next row and do a knit 2 together, so that we close that off and we make like a nice little mini circle here for our thumb. Okay, so I know it seems a little bit complicated. It really isn't. It's not complicated once you learn how to do that. Okay, so now what we're going to do on this next round is we are just going to knit every single stitch on this round. Sorry, there's target shooting in the background. That's just where I live. You hear it in a lot of my videos. I live in rural America, and it's legal to shoot on private property as long as you're not doing it at 3 in the morning and violating any kind of noise ordinance. So that's what's happening. If I waited to film when there wasn't shooting, well, who knows? So I have lots of neighbors who do that. So multiple neighbors who target shoot. So we are just going to keep on knitting this round. So we're going to knit these 10 stitches. We're going to get to the end, and then we're going to flip our project over, and we are going to knit across on needle 2. Okay, so I'm going to finish knitting this round, and then I am going to knit another round. Okay, so finish this round and then knit one more round where you knit all the way across all 20 stitches. Okay, 10 on each needle. So finish this round, do one more round of knit every single stitch. All right, and then we will see you at the next round. Okay, so I finished the round that I was working on with y'all, and then I knit one more round in stockinette stitch. And now, just like on our thumb gusset, right, we've got a little, I know it's hard to see it on the fur, but you can feel it. We want to create this garter stitch border so that our edges don't curl. I have a whole video on garter stitch showing you how to do it in the round flat, why we do it. So we want to create 4 rounds of garter stitch for our trim, for our border on the top of this. And so what that means for 4 rounds of garter stitch is that we knit 1 round, we purl 1 round, we knit 1 round, we purl 1 round. Okay, so for this round we are starting row 1 of our garter stitch edging. So yes, we're going to knit every single stitch. So we're just going to do the same thing, but this is round 1 of the garter stitch edging for the top of our mitt. So for this round, knit all 20 stitches all the way across. Okay, and then I'll see you at the beginning of the next round. Okay, so I just finished, that was row 1 of our garter stitch edging for the top of our little mitt. So that was a knit round every single stitch. For round 2 of our garter stitch edging, we are just going to purl every single stitch. So bring your yarn to the front. Okay, yarn in the front, and begin purling, and we will purl all 20 stitches. Okay, so for this round, purl every single stitch. Okay, see you at the next round. Okay, I just finished that purl round, so we're going to do the same thing for 2 more rounds. Okay, so round 3 of our garter stitch border at the top of our mitt, we are just going to knit every single stitch. All 20 stitches we knit all the way around. Okay, see you at the end of our 20 stitches at the beginning of our final round. Okay, so here we are on round 4 of our garter stitch border for the top of our mitt, and this is the final round before our bind off. So remember, for garter stitching the round, you just purl every single stitch. We are going to purl all 20 stitches, and then I will see you for our bind off. Okay, so you go ahead and purl your last round. Alrighty, okay, and we will pause. Okay, so that was the final round of our project, except for our bind off. And this is indeed what your project should look like. Okay, we got the edge, we got our garter stitch, we got our stockinette portion, we got our little thumb gusset here, a little pocket for our thumb. And now we're just gonna bind off, okay? So I'll start that with you, and then I'll leave you, and you can bind off however you want. If you bind off differently than me, that's totally fine. I'm not here to tell you what your best bind off method is for you, okay? So if you do it differently, you do it differently. I'm just gonna go ahead and start you off. I'm gonna knit my first, let's see if I can find it. I'm gonna knit, find my yarn back and everything. I'm going to knit my first stitch, and then I'm going to knit my second stitch. And then we are going to pass the stitch, the second stitch there on our needle over the top of the first stitch at the edge of our needle. Like I said, if you can do it with your needle tips and you can see what's happening over there on your needles, you do you. Nothing wrong with that, okay? I do it my way. I do it by feel tactily. I manipulate those stitches, but you do what works for you, okay? So just keep knitting your stitches. Knit the next stitch, 2 stitches on the right hand needle, and then one way or another pass that second stitch over the top of the stitch on the end of your needle, or however you want to do your bind off, okay? So I'm going to continue with my bind off, and then I will cut my yarn, tie off my project, and we'll get back together one more time to see my fingerless mitt, okay? Alrighty, so you bind off, you cut your yarn, you tie off your project, however you want to do it, and all the things, your ends, all of that, okay? And we'll take a look at my finished fingerless mitt. Okay, here it is. This is my, let me zoom it out for you. This is our first fancy and faux fur mitt in the pink. Like I said, I made mine just a little bit. It's all bound off. Here we go. I made mine just a little bit shorter than my gray ones. So that you could see that these are very, very customizable, right? You make them as long as you want, short as you want, as round as you want, and really it doesn't seem like it's much shorter than my gray one. Maybe just a little bit. Yeah, I did make it 4 rounds shorter. I did 20 rounds of stockinette on the gray, only 16 on the pink. So yeah, that makes sense because we got 4 rounds of garter stitch on the edge here, so it'd be 4 rounds shorter. But this is what this is going to look like with my gray ones and my black ones. They are identical. There really is no left and right. There's no difference in these. I mean, so just make another one, make it identical, and there's no, you know, these are fancy and faux fur fingerless mitts, so we don't have to have a stitch pattern at all for these. We just let the yarn do all the talking. So this is the gray one. I've got one in the pink. That's what yours are going to look like. This is our one in the pink right here. So I'm going to make a second one to match this, and you go ahead and make your second one to match. I'll pause the camera one more time, take you off the horizontal, let you see it up on the vertical, okay? Alrighty. Okay, so here I am. This is what it looks like on. This is mitt number 1 of the fancy and faux fur mitts in the pink, right? And the Knitpicks We Crochet Fairytale fur. And this is the gray one. Obviously, they don't match, but you know, because they're not the same color or the same length. But you make your second one to match yours. If you do 20 rounds of stockinette, you do 20. If you do 16, make them a little short. You can do them with 12, right? You can make them little shorties. You could do them with 10 and make them little shorties. You make yours, okay? Well, thank you so much for listening, right? And say hello in the comment section. Let me know if you made them. Let me know, I've already lost my needles, if you enjoyed let me know if you enjoyed this tutorial. This is the hat, right, that matches. So that's what we're doing. We're going to make ourselves a matching set. We're going to make 2 fingerless mitts to go with our fancy and faux fur hat, right? So like with my gray, I think that's my crochet version of the hat. Here we go. This is my fancy and faux fur knit hat. I've got my fingerless gloves here. And of course, right, of course, we have our scarf, and we will get to making that too, so that you too can have a match set, a fancy and faux fur hat, scarf, fingerless gloves. You make yours in whatever color you want. Let me know what color you use. Let me know if you enjoyed the tutorial, and let me know if you need any help with it, if you have any questions, okay? Well, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, happy stitching. Bye-bye for now.